Matthew, do not eat the sand. Damon Granger groaned, lunging forward as his 2-year-old son tried to shovel a fistful of playground grit into his mouth. Matthew giggled, his chubby cheeks dusted with dirt, clearly thrilled with himself. Damon sat back on the park bench, rubbing his hands down his jeans, which were already stained with formula, ketchup, and possibly tears his or Matthew's. It was hard to say. He exhaled slowly and dropped his head back, letting the late afternoon sun warm his face. It had been a long week. Correction, it had been a long year. He'd lost his job at the construction company 6 months ago when the site shut down. Since then, interviews had been far and few between, and when they did come, no one wanted to hire a single dad who needed to rush home to his son by 5. Money was tight. Rent was overdue. And the only thing keeping him sane was the sound of Matthew's laugh, like the one echoing now as he tottered toward the slide. I swear, kid, if I could bottle that laugh and sell it, we'd be millionaires, Damon muttered. Or billionaires, depending how cute it sounds in a commercial. The voice was amused, warm, and unexpectedly close. Damon turned his head and saw her. She was sitting on the other end of the bench, one leg crossed over the other, a coffee cup in her hand. Her hair was long, dark, and slightly windblown, and she wore sleek, tailored pants with a blouse that looked far too expensive for a park full of toddlers. But what struck him most was her smile, genuine, wide, and easy. He blinked. Sorry. She nodded toward Matthew. Your son. That laugh? It's golden. Damon chuckled, shaking his head. Yeah, he's a handful, but he's my whole world. I can tell, she said, sipping her coffee. Didn't mean to steal your bench, he added, suddenly self-conscious as he glanced at the worn diaper bag at his feet and the crusted applesauce stain on his shirt collar. You didn't. I like this bench. She glanced around. It's the only one that doesn't face the street. Less horns, more kids laughing. He looked at her again. She didn't have a stroller. No child nearby. Not even a dog. Just a woman alone in the park, dressed like she'd walked out of a boardroom. You here for a niece or nephew or something? He asked. Nope, she said. Just needed a break. Thought I'd get some air. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. Do you come here often? He laughed. Almost every day. Can't afford daycare, and he gets bored in the apartment. Matthew, who had now made it halfway up the slide ladder, shouted, Daddy, watch me. I'm watching, buddy. Damon called. The woman's smile widened. He's adorable. Thanks. He's lucky he's cute. It's the only reason I haven't sold him to the circus yet. She laughed, and Damon found himself grinning. It had been a while since someone laughed at his jokes. A long while. I'm Damon, he said, offering his hand. Zara. Zara Bennett. She shook his hand, her grip firm, and for a second too long, their eyes held. He cleared his throat. You sure you don't have a kid hiding somewhere? Zara smirked no, smiled. It was definitely a smile. Positive. Matthew screamed with delight as he slid down, landing in a pile of wood chips. Again, he shouted. Yep. That's the next hour of my life, Damon said, pushing off the bench. Zara stood too. Mind if I walk with you a bit? He blinked. You serious? She shrugged. You've got the most entertaining person in the park with you. Why not? So she followed them, watching as Damon helped Matthew back up the ladder, catching him at the bottom, high-fiving him like it was the Olympics. She asked questions about Matthew's favorite snacks, his favorite cartoons, his bedtime routine. Damon answered all of them, his voice proud even when describing tantrums and teething. What about you? He asked finally. What do you do? Zara hesitated only for a second before answering. I'm in business. He raised a brow. Business. She smiled. Yeah, I run a company. He whistled. Sounds fancy. It has its moments. An hour passed like 5 minutes. The sun dipped lower, turning the sky orange and gold. Damon finally scooped Matthew up, who was dozing off mid-yawn. I should get him home, he said, adjusting the boy on his shoulder. Zara nodded. Of course. He hesitated. You, come to this park often. She gave him a look. Is that your version of asking if I want to meet here again? He laughed. Maybe. Her eyes sparkled. Then yes. I do come to this park often. He grinned. Cool. And that was how it started. Over the next 2 weeks, they kept running into each other, always at the park, always when Damon needed a break, always when Zara just happened to be grabbing a coffee nearby. Sometimes she brought Matthew small toys, like a tiny stuffed dinosaur or a bubble wand. Other times, she and Damon would talk for hours while Matthew played, like they'd known each other for years. He told her about his life, how he dropped out of college when Matthew was born, how his ex had walked out before the baby turned 1, how he was trying to find work, but no one wanted a dad with limitations. She listened, really listened, and she told him, only bits and pieces, that she worked a lot, that her life didn't look like she thought it would, that she liked how Damon talked to his son like he was the most important person in the world. One afternoon, as Matthew napped in his stroller, Damon said, "You know, I still don't know what kind of business you run." Zara hesitated. "It's complicated." That sounds exactly like something someone says when they're the CEO of something important. She laughed, nervous. "Maybe. Are you?" "Am I what? A CEO?" Zara paused, then smiled. "Would you believe me if I said yes?" He blinked. "Wait, are you serious?" She met his eyes. "I run Bennett Tech. It's a software company." Damon stared. "I knew that name sounded familiar," he muttered. "You're on a billboard downtown." "I was," she said. "They took it down. Thank God." He let out a low whistle. "Well, so, you're, like, rich. Zara laughed. "I guess." He looked down at his scuffed shoes, suddenly hyper-aware of his worn-out jeans. "Why'd you talk to me, then?" "Because you're real," she said simply. "And because I like the way you love your son." He looked up at her, and for a second, neither of them said anything. Then she added, "And maybe because you're kinda cute when you're chasing a toddler with applesauce in your hair." That made him laugh, and she joined him. "I still don't get why you're sitting on park benches instead of boardroom chairs," he said. "Because sometimes," she said, "you need to step outside of the life you built to remember what matters." He stared at her, heart thudding in his chest. "I'm glad you did," he said quietly. "Me too," she whispered. And as Matthew stirred in his stroller, the world slowed down just enough for Damon to realize something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The next time Damon saw her, Zara wasn't on the bench. She was standing by the swings, her heels traded for flat leather loafers, her hair tied back. She looked different, not less polished, just more present. She was pushing Matthew gently, the boy laughing as he leaned back, legs kicking at the sky. Damon slowed his pace, watching them for a moment before he stepped close. "You stealing my kid again?" he asked. Zara glanced at him over her shoulder. He asked very politely to be pushed. "What was I supposed to do, say no?" "Fair," Damon said, stepping beside her. "You're good with him." "I like kids," she replied. "They're more honest than adults. And they don't care what kind of car you drive or how many zeros are on your paycheck." Damon didn't answer right away. A breeze rustled the trees, sending a few leaves swirling across the playground surface. He looked at her, really looked, as she focused on Matthew. Her expression was soft, almost wistful. There was something behind her eyes. Not sadness, exactly, but something close. He cleared his throat. "You all right?" Zara blinked. "Yeah, just reminded me of someone." Damon waited, but she didn't elaborate, and he didn't push. Instead, he nodded toward the swing. "Mind if I take over?" Zara stepped back, brushing her hands together. "He's all yours." Matthew leaned forward. "Higher, Daddy." "You got it, champ." Zara sat on the low wooden border of the playground, watching as Damon pushed his son with practiced rhythm. The sun was dipping lower, golden light slanting across the park. After a few minutes, Damon slowed the swing and scooped Matthew up. "Nap time," Damon said, settling Matthew into the stroller. "Whether he wants it or not." Zara stood. "You have any place to be?" He glanced at her, surprised. "Not really." "Why?" "There's a food truck festival a few blocks down. I walked past it on the way here. Thought maybe you and Matthew might want to check it out." "On me?" Damon hesitated. "You sure? I wouldn't have offered if I wasn't." He looked down at Matthew, who was already rubbing his eyes. "He'll probably crash in 5 minutes. But if you don't mind me pushing a sleeping toddler past a dozen taco stands, I'm in." She smiled. "Let's go." The walk was quiet at first. Damon was trying not to think about how much he liked walking beside her or how the scent of her perfume kept catching the wind. He focused on the buildings instead, letting the rhythm of the stroller wheels on pavement keep him grounded. When they reached the edge of the festival, the air was thick with the smell of fried garlic, grilled meat, and something sugary Damon couldn't quite name. "You weren't kidding," he said. "This place is packed." Zara pulled a pair of sunglasses from her bag and slid them on. "You like Thai food?" "Love it." "Perfect. There's a stand up ahead that makes these insane peanut noodles." Come on. As they moved through the crowd, Zara turned heads. Damon noticed. Men glanced, some more than once. She didn't seem to realize, or maybe she didn't care. Either way, she moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, like she belonged anywhere she chose to stand. When they reached the line, she turned to him. I'll wait here. Want to grab us a table? He nodded and wheeled Matthew to the far edge of the plaza, finding a small table tucked under a string of hanging lights. He adjusted the stroller so his son could sleep in the shade, then sat down. A few minutes later, Zara returned, 2 trays balanced in her hands. Hope you're hungry, she said, setting one of the trays in front of him. Damon stared. That's a lot of food. I didn't know what you liked, so I got a little of everything. He picked up a fork. You always do things like this? Like what? Buy out half a menu for someone you met at a park. Zara shrugged. It's not about the food. He watched her for a beat. Then what's it about? I like spending time with you, she said simply. And with Matthew. It's different. Good different. Damon took a bite, chewing slowly. Most people would have run the other direction when they saw a guy like me with a kid strapped to his chest and a diaper bag over one shoulder. I'm not most people. He smiled. No, you're definitely not. They ate in silence for a while, the noise of the crowd around them a low hum. When they finished, Damon leaned back in his chair. All right, be honest, he said. What's the catch? Zara raised an eyebrow. Catch? You're smart. Gorgeous. CEO of a major company. There's no way you're just hanging out with a broke single dad for fun. Zara set her fork down. You think I'm doing this out of pity? He shook his head. No, I don't get it. She leaned forward, her voice low. You're not just a single dad. You're present. Committed. You show up even when it's hard. That matters more than you think. He looked down at his hands, calloused and rough from years of labor. Doesn't change the fact that I'm barely keeping things together. Zara reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. Everyone's fighting their own battle, Damon. The difference is, you're not pretending everything's perfect. He didn't answer. Couldn't. After a moment, she pulled back. I should probably get going. Yeah, he said, standing. Me too. They walked back toward the park in silence, the fading light casting long shadows on the sidewalk. When they reached the edge, Damon stopped. Thanks. For the food. And the company. You're welcome. She hesitated. Can I ask you something? Sure. What would you do, she began, if you had the chance to change everything? He frowned. What do you mean? I mean if someone handed you an opportunity. A real one. No strings. Would you take it? Damon looked at her carefully. Depends what it is. Zara nodded. That's fair. She glanced down at Matthew, still sleeping. I'll see you around, she asked. Yeah, he said. You will. She turned and walked away, her silhouette framed by the streetlights. Damon watched her go, his chest tight with something he didn't quite understand. The next day, she didn't come to the park, nor the day after that. By the third day, Damon found himself scanning the benches, the pathways, even the coffee cart across the street. Nothing. He tried to tell himself it didn't matter, that she was a CEO after all. Busy. Important. Probably caught up in meetings or flying to some city with a skyline he'd only seen in movies. Still, the bench felt emptier without her. On the fourth day, a man in a navy suit approached Damon as he was zipping Matthew into his jacket. Mr. Granger? Damon looked up, wary. Yeah. The man extended a small envelope. Miss Bennett asked me to deliver this to you personally. Damon took it, confused. Wait, what is this? She said if you're interested, the address and time are inside. The man turned and walked away without another word. Damon stared at the envelope, then slowly opened the flap. Inside was a single embossed card. An address in Midtown. A time. 7 o'clock. No explanation. No signature. Just a small gold embossed logo in the corner. Bennett Tech. Damon exhaled slowly. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a dinner invite. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure whether to be nervous or excited. Damon stood outside the glass-paneled lobby of the Bennett Tech Tower, holding Matthew's hand with one arm and adjusting the collar of the only button-down shirt he owned with the other. The shirt was a bit snug across the shoulders and had a faint stain near the hem he couldn't scrub out. He'd paired it with black slacks that had seen better days and shoes he'd polished using an old toothbrush and dish soap. He glanced up at the steel letters on the building's exterior, backlit by elegant white lighting. Bennett Tech. The name felt heavier now that he was standing in front of it, like he was about to walk into another dimension. The doorman eyed him as he approached, but didn't stop him when Damon showed the card. The lobby was sleek and impossibly quiet. Marble floors stretched out beneath a ceiling so high it made him feel 3 inches tall. A woman in a tailored uniform stood behind the reception desk, smiling politely when he approached. "I have a card," Damon said, holding it out. She took it, scanned it with a small device, and nodded. "Penthouse. Take elevator C. It's already been programmed for you." He blinked. "Penthouse." "Yes, sir." He turned toward the elevators, adjusting Matthew in his arms. The toddler had fallen asleep in the cab on the way over, his head heavy on Damon's shoulder. The elevator ride was smooth and fast, the numbers lighting up in rapid succession. When it stopped, the doors opened directly into a private foyer with floor-to-ceiling windows. The skyline beyond was a glittering sea of lights, and the room itself was silent except for the faint hum of jazz music coming from somewhere deeper inside. Damon stepped forward, uncertain. "Damon." Zara appeared from around the corner. She was barefoot, wearing a long, navy sweater over black leggings, her hair loosely tied at the nape of her neck. The casual look surprised him more than the penthouse did. Her eyes settled on Matthew, still asleep in his arms. "There's a guest room down the hall," she said softly. "I had a crib brought in. Come on." He followed her through the apartment, past glass walls, modern art, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. The guest room was warm and softly lit. A portable crib stood by the window, dressed in clean white linen. Damon laid Matthew down gently, brushing a curl from his son's forehead as he settled. Zara waited in the doorway, arms crossed softly over her chest. When Damon stepped out and pulled the door shut behind him, she nodded toward the living room. "Come sit," she said. He followed her again, this time to a wide sectional overlooking the city. A tray with 2 glasses and a bottle of something dark sat on the table. She poured a drink and handed it to him. "Whiskey," she offered. "Don't usually, but tonight feels like an exception." They clinked glasses, and Damon took a sip, the burn of it settling into something warm in his chest. He looked at her, eyebrows raised. "Okay, I'll bite." "What exactly is this?" "A job offer," Zara said plainly. Damon blinked. "You're kidding." She shook her head. "You said you were in construction, that you were good with your hands. I have a property being renovated upstate. It's a private retreat I bought 2 years ago, but the last contractor bailed and left the place unfinished. I need someone to oversee the completion." He stared. "You want me to run your construction site?" Zara nodded. "You'd live on the property. Full access to the facilities. It's remote, but there's a local school for Matthew and a caretaker who lives nearby. You'd have resources. A team. I'd handle the salary and relocation costs." He stood up abruptly, running a hand through his hair. "This is insane. You barely know me." "I know enough. I don't have a degree. No formal management experience. I've never overseen a full project start to finish. You've kept a tiny human alive on your own for over 2 years. That's enough proof for me." He paced the room, heart pounding. "You're offering me a job and a place to live. That's not nothing." "I know. Why?" She stood too, stepping closer. "Because I've been in places where no one offered me a hand, where I had to build everything from nothing. And because you're the first person I've met in years who sees me for more than what's printed on my business cards." He met her eyes. "This is more than a job, isn't it?" She nodded. "It could be." He took a breath. "I don't want to be a charity case." "You're not. And I don't want to feel like this offer disappears if things between us don't work out." "It doesn't," she said. "I'm not that kind of person." His hands dropped to his sides. "I just need to know this is real." Zara stepped forward and placed her hand gently on his chest. "It's real." They stood like that for a moment, the city spread out behind them, the air between them thick with things unspoken. Damon felt his defenses cracking, the walls he'd built brick by brick since Matthew's mother left starting to crumble. He looked down at her. "If I say yes, when do I start?" "Tomorrow," she said, "if you're ready." He laughed, the sound equal parts nervous and exhilarated. "You don't waste time. I don't like waiting for the right things." He studied her face, the way her eyes didn't flinch, didn't waver, even under the weight of everything she was offering. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's do it." Zara smiled, and it lit up her whole face. "Good," she said. "Because I already booked the movers." His jaw dropped. "You what?" I had a feeling, she said, sipping her whiskey. Besides, you were going to say yes. I could tell. He sat back down, shaking his head. You're unbelievable. She grinned. Takes one to know one. Later that night, after she walked him to the elevator and pressed the button herself, Damon turned to her. So, what does this make us? Zara tilted her head. What do you want it to make us? He thought about it. Really thought. And then he said, not just co-workers. Good, she said. Because I'm not interested in hiring you for your construction skills alone. He raised an eyebrow. Oh. She stepped closer, just enough that he could feel the warmth of her body. I like you, Damon. And I like your son. This isn't about playing games or filling a role. I just want to see where this goes. Without pressure. Without pretending. He nodded slowly. Then let's see. The elevator dinged. Zara leaned in and kissed his cheek. Sleep well. Damon stepped in, heart drumming like a teenager's. As the doors closed, he leaned back against the panel, exhaling sharply. Whatever tomorrow held, he knew two things. He had a job, and he wasn't walking into it alone. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the country house, casting long golden streaks across the floorboards of the living room. Damon stood barefoot in the kitchen, watching the coffee drip slowly into the pot as Matthew clutched a toy train and made slow laps around the island, humming to himself. The house smelled like cedar and clean linens. Quiet surrounded them, broken only by birdsong and the creak of floorboards as someone walked above them. Zara had arrived late the night before, after Damon and Matthew had already settled in. She was staying for the weekend, she'd explained over the phone, to review progress on the retreat and finalize some design decisions. Damon hadn't seen her since the night she'd kissed his cheek and sent him down the elevator with a whiskey-fueled smile that had lived in his head ever since. He poured 2 mugs and carried one out to the back porch where she stood barefoot in the grass, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, a steaming mug already in her hands. You always up this early? He asked, handing her the second cup. Zara turned and took it with a grateful nod. I forgot how quiet this place is in the morning. I didn't want to miss it. Damon leaned against the railing. You do this often? Leave the city for peace and quiet. Not nearly enough, she said. But I've been thinking I might change that. He watched her as she took a long sip, her eyes trained on the tree lean in the distance. There was a softness to her he'd never seen in the city, not less confident, just less contained. You look different out here, he said. She turned, one brow lifting. Better or worse? Better, he said without hesitation. Like you can breathe. She smiled, but didn't answer. Instead, she turned her eyes back to the trees. I always thought I'd build something like this for my dad someday. He used to talk about retiring to a place with a porch and a view. Damon glanced at her. Used to. He died 4 years ago, she said, her voice steady. Heart failure. It was sudden. He worked too much, didn't slow down. I think he thought he had more time. Damon set his mug down. I'm sorry. Zara shrugged, but the motion was tight. He was the reason I started Bennett Tech. He taught me how to build, and how to fight for what I wanted. But he never saw any of this. She gestured around her. He never got to see what I made of it. Damon stepped closer, resting his hand lightly on the railing beside hers. He'd be proud. I don't know much about your world, but I know what it means to create something from the ground up. And I know what it costs. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. You're the first person I've told that to. Outside my boardroom, I mean. Everyone else just wants to talk numbers. I get it, he said. People like to measure success in spreadsheets. But that's not what matters when you're drinking coffee barefoot before sunrise. She laughed softly, and the sound felt like a thread stitching something closed between them. Later that morning, Zara walked the property with Damon as he showed her the progress on the renovation. The main lodge had been gutted and reframed, the walls reinforced, and the roof replaced. The workers, a small team Damon had handpicked from nearby towns, respected him. That much was clear in the way they greeted him, took his notes, and asked questions without hesitation. You've got a good team, Zara said when they stepped into the unfinished dining hall. I got lucky, Damon said. They care about the project. And I think they like that I don't stand around barking orders. You lead from the middle, she observed. I don't have the luxury of standing above anyone. Zara leaned against the window frame, watching him as he moved through the space, pointing out plans and materials. You know, when I first offered you this job, I wasn't sure what I was doing. That makes 2 of us. But I'm sure now, she said. You belong here. Damon met her eyes. You mean on the payroll or in your life? Her expression didn't waver. Both. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. I'm not the kind of guy who knows how to play games, Zara. I work, I raise my son, and I try not to screw up the things that matter. I'm not looking for someone who plays games, she said. I'm looking for someone who shows up. He brushed her hair back from her face, his hand lingering at her jaw. I'm here. She leaned into his touch for just a moment before the sound of little feet echoed down the hallway. Daddy. Where are you? Matthew's voice rang out. Damon stepped back, and Zara smiled softly. We'll pick this up later. They spent the afternoon walking the grounds, Matthew bouncing between them like a pinball. Zara let him climb onto her shoulders at one point, holding his knees as he shouted that he was taller than the trees. Damon watched the two of them, something deep in his chest tugging loose. That night, after dinner around the long wooden table Damon had sanded and stained himself, Matthew fell asleep in the guest room with a book still open across his chest. Damon pulled the door shut gently and found Zara in the living room, a fire crackling in the hearth and a blanket draped over her legs. He sat beside her, their knees touching. You're good with him, he said. I like him, she said. He's honest. And he laughs with his whole face. You know, when I first met you, I thought maybe you were just humoring me. Some rich woman getting her feel-good moment by talking to the single dad in the park. I'd never do that, she said. I know that now. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire. Damon turned toward her, his voice quiet. You're not afraid of this? Of what? Of me. Of Matthew. Of the mess that comes with both. I'm not afraid of real life, she said. I've had enough of perfect dinners and cold boardrooms. I want something with warmth. Something messy and important. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. I can't promise perfect, but I can promise I'll keep showing up. That's all I want. He leaned in and kissed her slowly, surely, with the kind of depth that comes from having nothing left to hide. She kissed him back with equal certainty, her hand sliding up to rest behind his neck, anchoring him to the moment. When they pulled apart, her expression was soft and open. So what now? Now, Damon said. We build something. Together. In the weeks that followed, the house became more than a job site. Zara spent more time upstate, taking remote meetings from the study Damon had converted into a temporary office. Matthew thrived at the nearby preschool, coming home every day with new words and paint on his clothes. Damon's days were long, but full of work, of laughter, of moments he'd once thought he'd never have again. One Saturday morning, he walked into the kitchen to find a small box on the counter. Inside was a key, and beneath it, a note in Zara's handwriting. No expectations, just a door that's always open. He looked up and saw her standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. You're sure? He asked. I've never been more sure. That evening, Damon unlocked the door to the main house with the key she'd given him. Matthew ran ahead, arms spread like airplane wings. Zara waited on the porch, and when Damon reached her, she took his hand and led him inside. That night, they didn't talk about the future. They lived it. The months that followed weren't perfect. There were late nights, missed calls, and the occasional disagreement about how many marshmallows Matthew was allowed in his hot chocolate. But they were a family. On a spring morning nearly a year after they'd first met, Damon stood in the same park where it all began. Matthew held a small bouquet of wildflowers, fidgeting with the ribbon tied around the stems. Daddy, is she coming? She'll be here, Damon said. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, and Zara stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement. She wore no makeup, just jeans and a tucked-in shirt. But to Damon, she looked like everything he'd ever wanted. Matthew ran to her, holding out the flowers. These are for you. Zara knelt to take them, her eyes wide. They're beautiful. Did you pick them? Daddy helped, he said proudly. Zara looked up and met Damon's gaze. He stepped forward, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. I don't have a yacht or a private island, he said, but I have a toolbox that's always open, a son who thinks you're magic, and a heart that hasn't stopped choosing you since the day you sat on that park bench. Zara's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring. Marry me, he said, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. She didn't hesitate. Yes. Matthew clapped, and the park around them faded into background noise. Damon kissed her, and this time, there were no walls left to crumble. Just a man who'd built a life from broken pieces and a woman who'd chosen to sit beside him on a bench when he needed it the most. Together, they walked forward into a life neither of them had planned, but both of them had built. One brick, one laugh, one kiss at a time. By autumn, the retreat was complete. The final stone was laid on the front terrace 2 weeks before the leaves turned gold, and by the time the first frost kissed the fields, Damon had finished installing the last of the iron light fixtures by hand. The once abandoned estate had transformed into a sanctuary of glass, wood, and warmth nestled inside the forest like it had always belonged. Damon stood at the edge of the property one crisp morning, the scent of pine in the air and the sound of distant laughter carrying from the hill. He could see Zara walking hand in hand with Matthew along the winding path, both bundled in flannel and scarves. Matthew was pointing at something in the trees with a wide grin, a backpack bouncing against his back as he explained it in wild, sweeping gestures. Damon let the sight sit in his chest for a long breath before heading back inside. Zara had been splitting her time between the city and the retreat, but lately, she stayed longer each visit. Her meetings happened by the fireplace now, and she'd started keeping a pair of boots by the front door. Damon hadn't asked her to move in. He didn't need to. She was already here in all the ways that mattered. That evening, with Matthew asleep upstairs and a fire flickering in the stone hearth, Zara curled up beside him on the couch, a blueprint unfolded on her lap. "You sure about expanding the East Wing?" she asked, tracing a finger along the sketched edition. "It's not for me," Damon said. "I was thinking we could use a proper library. And maybe a guest room or two." She looked up. "Planning on company?" "I was thinking more long-term," he said. "If you're going to keep pretending you're just visiting, we might as well make it official." Zara narrowed her eyes. "Is that your version of a proposal?" "Not yet," he said, standing and disappearing into the hall. When he returned, he held a small wooden box, the grain warm and polished. He handed it to her without a word. She opened it to find a ring unlike any she'd ever seen, a stone set in brushed gold, simple but crafted with care. She ran her thumb over the edge before meeting his eyes. "You made this," she said softly. "I did." Zara looked at him, her voice quiet. "Why now?" "Because I'm ready," he said. "And because I want this to be home for all of us. Not just a place we pass through." She stood, pressed her hand to his chest, and whispered, "Ask me." Damon took her hand, steady and sure. "Will you marry me, Zara Bennett? And build the rest of this life with me?" "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "Yes, I will." They didn't need a grand ceremony. They didn't need a ballroom or a guest list of 500. What they wanted was here under this roof, beside this fire, with Matthew asleep upstairs and the stars outside watching in silence. They married 2 months later in the courtyard of the retreat, surrounded by the first snow of winter. Matthew held the rings, Zara wore a dress the color of cream, and Damon stood in a tailored suit he'd never thought he'd own. The vows were simple. The kiss, deep and sure. Afterward, they held hands as they walked through the trees behind the house, the snow crunching underfoot. Matthew ran ahead, tossing snow in the air and catching flakes on his tongue. Zara leaned into Damon's side, her breath visible in the cold air. "You ever think about how strange this all is?" she asked. "How we met. Every day. And what if I hadn't gone to the park that day? You would have found me eventually," he said. "I think we were always going to find each other." She smiled, confident. "No," he said. "Just sure now." That night, they danced barefoot in the living room, Matthew spinning between them until he collapsed in laughter. Zara played old jazz records while Damon lit every candle in the house. They slow danced until the music stopped, then stood in silence, forehead to forehead, while the fire burned low. Over the years, life unfolded in ways neither of them could have predicted. Zara stepped back from the daily operations of Bennett Tech, handing the reins to her second-in-command while she focused on expanding the retreat into a creative's haven. Writers, architects, and designers came from around the world to stay for a few weeks at a time, working in the quiet beauty she and Damon had built. The place took on a life of its own, part sanctuary, part gallery, part home. Damon oversaw every renovation, every expansion. He never stopped working with his hands, even when Zara insisted he didn't need to anymore. He taught Matthew how to swing a hammer safely, how to respect the grain of wood, and how to fix a fence without shortcuts. And when Matthew brought home his first art project from school, an uneven model of the retreat, made from toothpicks, Damon framed it like it was a blueprint. Zara and Damon never stopped learning each other either. He learned that she liked her tea with lemon at night, that she read the last page of books first, and that she sometimes woke from dreams with poems on her lips. She learned that he hummed when he worked, that he hated wearing socks indoors, and that he cried quietly, deeply when Matthew sang at the school holiday concert. They didn't fight often, but when they did, they fought fair. They listened. They took space when needed and always circled back. Their love wasn't built on perfection. It was built on presence. One spring, 2 years after the wedding, Damon built a treehouse at the edge of the property. Matthew helped, now older, taller, with his father's steady hands and his mother's sharp eye. On the day they finished it, Zara climbed the ladder with a picnic basket and found her boys sitting side by side, legs swinging over the edge. She joined them, and they watched the sun dip behind the treetops. Damon pulled her close, and Matthew leaned against her other side. And in that moment on a wooden platform above the earth, surrounded by trees and quiet love, Zara realized something. She hadn't just changed her life. She'd rewritten it. Years passed, and the retreat became legendary. People came to find inspiration, but they stayed for the sense of belonging. Damon's name was whispered with admiration among builders. Zara's legacy expanded from tech to restoration, from CEO to founder of something soul deep. But for them, none of that was what mattered. What mattered was Sunday mornings. Pancakes with too many blueberries. Matthew's laughter echoing down the halls. The way Damon still brushed his thumb along Zara's cheek when she read by the fire. The quiet certainty that whatever storms came next, they would weather them together. They didn't need a fairy tale. They had something better. They had a life. And they were still building it, hand in hand, one beautiful day at a time.